Hello, AP Worlders. Welcome to Revolutions in the Atlantic World. Here's a good map, show the different revolutions, right? We're going to discuss the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, and the Latin America revolutions. All right, here's the Haitian Revolution, sorry. But yeah, so we're going to discuss these revolutions, also in Mexico revolution during this time period. All right, and they're going to take place between 1775 and 1825. And these upheavals are going to reflect the new connections amongst Europe, Africa, North America, and South America. And from the early 18th century to the mid 19th, many parts of the world are going to witness political and social upheaval, leading some historians to think in terms of a world crisis was occurring. All right. So besides for the Atlantic revolutions, there are revolutions going on in other places. The Safavid dynasty that we learned about last year, that ruled the Persia area, which is now Iran, they're going to collapse. The Mughal Empire, which was in India, they're going to collapse. And then Russian Empire, which was under Catherine the Great, they're going to go through a series of peasant uprisings. And China was going to have a number of uprisings and rebellions as well. All right. So this wasn't unique for the other areas, or these revolutions in the Atlantic world weren't alone. All right. The Atlantic revolutions in North America, though, they are going to be distinctive in numerous ways. All right. First, they were global rather than regional. All right, so you might remember in eighth grade learning about the 7 Years' War, all right, or the French American War, right? We call it French American War in the United States, but the rest of the world would refer to it as the 7 Years' War, right? So that because fighting didn't take place just in the Americas, right, with the French and Indian War, it also took place in Europe. But Britain are going to impose taxes on the colonists to pay for that 7 Years' War, and which would be those taxes that you probably remember about in eighth grade, like the Stamp Act, um, the the Tea Act, right? All those acts, and then the French are also going to need to seek new revenue to pay for the war, right? Which is eventually going to lead to their French Revolution. All right, the Atlantic revolutions were also distinctive in that they were closely connected to each other. All right, so the different revolutions are going to kind of lead off of each other. All right, if you look at the dates, the American Revolution's here, 1776, right? Then the French Revolution, 1789, and 1792 for the Haitian, and then 1810, right? So they're all going to kind of follow and are connected. All right, the Atlantic revolutions are also going to share a set of common ideas. All right, they're going to get these ideas from the Enlightenment movement. All right, we kind of discussed the Enlightenment movement last unit, but we'll review them a little bit during this unit. But hopefully, you remember the Enlightenment unit with came along with the Renaissance, the Reformation, scientific revolution, then the Enlightenment. All right, and the final distinction for these revolutions where they had a global impact. All right, the ideas of the Atlantic revolutions are going to inspire different efforts to one, abolish slavery, extend the right to voting, develop constitutions, greater equality for women, and probably the biggest, maybe put a star next to this, is they're going to promote the idea of nationalism. All right, nationalism is going to start during these Atlantic revolutions, and they're going to shape much of the 19th and 20th century world history. All right, so much of that next era, the modern era, is going to be shaped by this idea of nationalism. All right, and then also human equality is going to be articulated in these revolutions. So the Enlightenment era, if you remember, it was an era of reason and thought, and they some ideas that came about was that people have natural rights. All right, so that idea that we have, oh, whoops, sorry, that we have natural rights and we're born with these natural rights. And also the separation of powers. All right. So remember, before this wasn't on your note sheet. So make sure you remember this or add this to your notes. Right. Before this, we had absolutism, where the kings had complete power and there was nobody to check their power. Right. And so now, under the Enlightenment thought, is there should be a separation of powers. All right. So similar to how we have the three branches, right? That idea that there shouldn't be just one person or one group with all the power. All right. Also, separation of church and state, and people have freedom of thought. All right, so a lot of those Bill of Rights that we have, right, the rights of freedom of speech, things like that, all that's going to come about during this Enlightenment era. One other thing to note that's not on your sheet is also Europe's going to go through what is known as the Commercial Revolution. All right, and so that was because Europe had such an increase in trade from that Columbian exchange that new goods came to Europe, but also new wealth came to Europe. All right. And as new wealth came, the people wanted more rights. All right. So the people demanded more rights. All right. So there are differences to these revolutions when we compare all of them. All right. The Atlantic revolutions differed first by their different circumstances that triggered or caused all of them. All right. Second, there was quite different social and political tensions and results. And third, they varied considerably in their outcomes. All right, some ended up being very well, and some didn't. All right, but we're going to go to um, the we're going to go to the right. So we're going to go to the Atlantic Revolution first. All right, we're not going to spend much time on this because hopefully you remember it from eighth grade U.S. history. But remember, these people, what they wanted to do is to preserve the existing liberties that the colonies had rather than to create new ones. So they were used to the king pretty much leaving them alone of England. All right. But after the French and Indian War, they started to impose new taxes on these colonists. All right. And so you guys know the term no taxation without representation. You might remember that. All right. And so they were really mad that these changes were happening, that now they had less freedoms. All right. So they wanted to keep the freedoms that they had previously. All right. And then the American Revolution grew not from social tension, but from a rather sudden and unexpected effort by the British government to tighten its control over the colonies and to extract more revenue from them. All right, so those taxes, you might remember they made the proclamation of 1763 that said they couldn't move out west because that's where the Native Americans were. You had like the Quartering Act. All right, so all those things were things that they weren't used to having. And so when the British did it, they wanted, they were upset. All right. All right, so that leads us into the French Revolution. And that's the next one. And thousands of French soldiers provided assistance to American colonists during their American Revolution. And now they came back to France with enthusiasm for their own government. And the French government aided the Americans with troops, but also with money. And they were almost bankrupt. And they needed a new tax system. So the king at the time, King Louis the 16th, he's going to call a session of the Estates General. All right, and that was made up of all three of the states. There was the first estate, which was kind of like the elite. Then the second estate, which was like the church and the clergy members. All right, then the third estate, which was the common people, and that was like 90% of the population, and they had little to no rights. All right, the first two estates was only about 2% of the population. All right, the third estate would then organize themselves and they formed what was the National Assembly. And they drew up a declaration of the rights of man and citizen. And in it, they declared that men are born and remain free and equal in rights. And this is what's going to launch the French Revolution. All right, now this is going to stop. So, because we only get 10 minutes, because this time I'm recording on the Chromebook. So make sure you tune in for part 2 after this.